In 1993, a then unknown comedy writer named Conan O'Brien was elevated from his perch as a lowly comedy writer for The Simpsons and Saturday Night Live into the hosting chair of NBC's Late Night. Late Night with Conan O'Brien debuted to less than stellar reviews. In fact, during the first few months of its existence, Conan and his staff were under the constant pressure, the dark clouds of possibly being canceled. But they found their groove and went on to create an amazing run on NBC's Late Night. So much so that when Jay Leno was looking to retire, NBC executives promised the Tonight Show chair to Conan O'Brien, a chair that he coveted, a seat that he took in the fall of 2009. Unfortunately, the same critics were slow to jump on the Coco wagon, and ratings being low caused NBC brass to get nervous. In December of 2009, when ex-Tonight Show host Jay Leno casually mentioned in an interview that he would return to the 10:35 p.m. time slot should NBC call, suddenly the late wars erupted. When NBC asked Conan O'Brien if he would be willing to shift the time slot of the Tonight Show from 10:35 to 11:05 to make space for a new Jay Leno 30-minute half-hour variety program, O'Brien responded with a no, because in the East Coast markets, it would cause the Tonight Show to begin after midnight. It wouldn't be the Tonight Show. It would be the Tomorrow Show. Long story short, an epic 10-day showdown in January 2010 played out in real time nightly on the Tonight Show as Conan O'Brien was muscled out to create space for the return of Jay Leno. And during one of his final moments on the Tonight Show, going through humiliation, going through betrayal, losing the dream, Conan O'Brien looked into the camera and said these words: "I just want to say to the kids out there watching, you can do anything you want in life, unless Jay Leno wants to do it too." What do you do when your dream, your business, your sacrifices get Leno'd? Do you respond with anger? Do you respond by getting back at Leno? Or could Conan O'Brien actually provide a better, nobler pathway for fearless leaders everywhere? Welcome to episode 56. This is the Fearless Leadership Podcast. Hey, I'm Jonathan Herron, a regular guy who grew up in the cornfields of Iowa, but don't hold that against me. I married my high school sweetheart 23 years ago, and we've been on an amazing adventure called life. It's taken us to orphanages in South Africa, through the streets of Old Jerusalem, and along the way, we've adopted 5 amazing kiddos. We love pouring into people's lives. And that passion led my wife and I 8 years ago to start a fresh, new, modern church for people who don't always like going to church. We started our church completely from scratch 8 years ago with no money, no building, no people, and frankly, no clue. We took a different approach to our startup. We leaned heavily on my background from Chicago improv comedy. We discovered that you can connect through comedy. 8 years later, And Lifeway Research and Outreach Magazine recently named Life Church Michigan as the 11th fastest growing church in America. It's true. You can connect through comedy. I also wrote a best-selling book called Holy Shift along the way, and I've discovered a passion for helping ordinary people jumpstart their lives and fearlessly chase their dreams and goals in life. These are the tools to change your life, leadership, and legacy. This is the Fearless Leadership Podcast. Hey gang, welcome back to the Fearless Leadership Podcast. We're at episode 56. Jonathan Herron here, coming to you from the high five state of Michigan, our new recording studio at the church I love, Life Church. Grab a notebook. I've got some nuggets for you as we lean into the wisdom of, who would have thunk it, Conan O'Brien, and how he dealt with disappointment, betrayal, hurts, boomeranged, bounced back into some of the best comedy in years. This is an episode that is going to not only encourage you, but motivate you, your team, the people around you. So if this is helpful, take those written notes in your notebook and share them. Share them on Twitter, share them in a Facebook post if you still use Facebook, or better yet, share this episode 56 of the Fearless Leadership Podcast with your team. Seriously, the better a leader gets, the better an organization gets. And I want you to win in life, in leadership, in leaving a legacy. And speaking of leaving things, thanks for leaving the positive reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, the comments on the YouTube channel. Man, that just means the world to me and to the team behind the scenes here at Life Church. We just want to be effective. We just want to help you get better. We don't claim to know the answer to everything necessarily, but we've been, given some great experiences, and we want to steward our resources well. That's the heartbeat behind the Fearless Leadership Podcast. I want you to fearlessly take the stage, just like a comedian, understanding that you don't have to tell ha-ha jokes. You don't have to be funny. It's more about your personality. If we had more business leaders, more church leaders who had a playful personality, then we would realize that you can connect through comedy, but you got to be fearless. Too many people are scared of seizing every moment. And so my hope is that through the encouragement of this podcast, we're giving you insanely practical tips on how to fearlessly impact lives and to reach more people in your business, in your church, in your organization. Conan O'Brien had a wide reach when he shifted from late night to the 1 hour earlier, the Tonight Show, the gold standard. Millions of people tuned in that first week. He had great ratings. And then very quickly, there was a decline in the ratings. Whether that's fair or not, shifty Jay Leno weaseled his way into hijacking Conan O'Brien's dream. You can YouTube highlights from that final week of The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien. Honestly, it was hilarious. He was taking shots at NBC brass. Other talk show hosts like Jimmy Kimmel and David Letterman were jumping in with their thoughts on Jay Leno's character. But man, Conan O'Brien suddenly was unemployed. All of the writers, the producers, the staff that he had moved from New York to the West Coast, they were unemployed. It was a tough, stressful time that was chronicled later in a documentary about Conan O'Brien. And I've always been fascinated by this season of his life, so much so that in my bestseller, Holy Shift, I actually take some time with how Conan O'Brien dealt with Jay Leno. Because just like famous comedians, leaders have critics. Many of them are a sea of anonymous faces because of social media. Anybody with a strong Wi-Fi connection can log in from their mother's basement. Their Cheeto-dusted fingers can rat-a-tat-tat on the keyboard, and they don't have to use their real name. That's the beauty of Reddit. But for Conan O'Brien, we actually get a blueprint for how to rebound from disappointment. As we're all emerging from our caves, this post-COVID world, I feel like as I look out at society, it's the end of prohibition. Remember that? Well, no, because we weren't alive back then. But when you look at the history books, the end of prohibition, everybody was getting drunk. They're having parties, doing all the things that they weren't able to do previously. That's what it's like right now in this post-COVID season. People aren't flooding back to your small business. They're not flooding back into your church, and school's out for the summer. Instead, people are going out to do the things they couldn't do for 14 months. They've seen enough of Tiger King on Netflix. So people are going out camping. They're going to Cedar Point. They're making memories. And in the midst of it, some of us in leadership roles are kind of going, well, wait, where is everybody? Our doors have reopened. Where is the pre-COVID crowd? And for some of us, we've experienced a lot of hardship and a lot of loss over these past 14 months. We may feel like Conan O'Brien in some ways, like we got gypped, man. That's why I want to lean into some leadership lessons from how Conan O'Brien dealt with Jay Leno. As I shared in that opening quip, Conan O'Brien once said, "I just want to say to all the kids out there watching, you can do anything in life." Unless Jay Leno wants to do it too. That's a great joke, and it still works today. See, we want to build bridges, not burn bridges. Even if you've been sideswiped by a Jay Leno, turn every loss into a lesson. Conan O'Brien was hurt by Jay Leno in January of 2010. He had been contractually guaranteed the prestigious hosting duties of NBC's The Tonight Show 6 years earlier. And within just a matter of months of taking on this new gig, he was Leno'd. Anytime Conan is asked to look back and talk about that painful experience, Conan O'Brien adheres to a simple principle. Don't throw the past under the bus, even when you have been Leno'd. Conan doesn't throw the past under the bus. Even when David Letterman was publicly sniffing for dirty laundry to air on his program, because that's what gossips do, they sniff out dirty laundry, Conan O'Brien did not dishonor NBC. Leaders don't throw the past under the bus, even when they're Leno'd. There is no honor in tearing down people and organizations, especially in church world. I mean, think about it. Those of you who are church leaders, Christ purchased the church with his own blood, it says in the book of Acts. That's huge. That means God loves the church. He created the church. He declares the church to be Christ's bride. And have you ever talked smack about another man's wife? No. Black eyes do not elevate you. They actually bring you down a peg in life and in leadership, and leaves a horrible legacy. So if you've been wounded in these past 14 months by a client, by a family member, by someone in your circle of influence, it doesn't give you the right to muddy their name. If someone's disappointed you in the past, just remember, we're all human. We're all fragile. We're all flesh and blood. We all make mistakes. In fact, you and I are rough drafts of the person we are becoming. So that person who Leno'd you, that person who threw you under the bus, they're not your enemy. They aren't. They're just another person doing their best to get through life. The best payback is not revenge. It's the freedom you'll find in forgiving, in letting go, in moving forward. Seriously, I'm giving you permission to forgive and let go. Your job is not to dig up dirt on people, but to wipe the dirt off people and launch them into their destiny. And I know that idea is scary. John, you're saying let them off the hook. No, I'm not saying that. Forgiveness means that you will absorb the cost that they incurred. You won't hold it against them anymore. That makes you the bigger person. That gives you power and freedom to press forward. And by not burning bridges, get this, it may come around in the future to bless you. Seriously. Leaders understand that integrity is doing the right thing, even when it hurts. And when you sign up for leadership, you sign up to be misunderstood. There are multiple decisions, especially in this COVID-paced world. There are multiple decisions that land on your desk that you have to pull the trigger on. And yes, there will be people who misunderstand you, who assign blame and shame to your actions because they don't have all the information. And guess what? They don't need all the information. You have nothing to prove and no one to impress. If you are being a fearless leader, you are placing honor, honesty, and integrity ahead of your ego. We don't need leaders full of swagger and ego. What I'm hungry to see are people like you who choose to do the right thing, even when it hurts. Trust me, I've been unjustly hurt many times in 20 years of full-time ministry. In fact, during COVID, I had probably the biggest explosion of betrayal I've ever experienced in my professional life. And yet, there is freedom in not fighting back. Listen, sometimes your greatest demonstration of strength is not fighting back. Walking in integrity, taking the high road, that honors God and inspires people. I've found that God is honored most when we talk smack the least. If you're a leader who has walked through the fire, allow me to share the wisdom of Isaac. Isaac appears very early on in the scriptures, in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 26, we get a snapshot of fearless leadership. Isaac was a man who was misunderstood, dishonored, and shunned over and over again. But get this, Isaac doesn't fight back. Isaac submits to God's will, and he finds closure in a beautiful display of his beliefs. It says in the scriptures, Isaac asked them, "Why have you come to me, since you were hostile to me and sent me away?" The people answered, so the J. Lenos answered, "We saw clearly that the Lord was with you. So we said, there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. And now you are blessed by the Lord. You have nothing to prove, no one to impress. Take the high road. There's less traffic, and you're going to have greater impact in your life, in your leadership, in your legacy. If you've been Jay Leno'd, join the club. But stay focused on the prize. Don't get caught up on sideways energy projects. Keep pressing forward. And let me tell you, there's a lot of work to do. There are businesses to rebuild. There are students to engage in your schools. In my world, church world, we have people to reach. Some new statistics just came up from our friends at Lifeway Research. 2 weeks ago, they released these stats from 2019 about the state of the church in North America. Before COVID, in 2019, nationwide, we saw 3,500 new churches open their doors. And that's a great thing. If you're a friend of the podcast, you know I'm passionate about reaching people who would never darken a church door. The fastest way, the most effective method of reaching people far from God is new church startups. Why? Because most churches have baggage, they have insider drama and silliness. They become fixated on their navels. There's this gravitational pull in most churches to cater to the insiders. So when you start a new church from scratch, you have a clean slate. You can be creative. You can have fun. You can open the doors wide and say there's more room at the table for everyone. And so I was excited at first when I saw this stat from Lifeway Research in 2019, pre-COVID, 3,500 new church startups. Woo! But then I continued reading. In that same time period, 4,000 churches permanently closed their doors. 4,000 churches. That means in 2019, we were already at a net loss of churches that could engage people who are in need of hope and truth. Then you get to COVID, and man, you don't need me to tell you this. The pandemic accelerated every trend. For example, the American shopping mall. I was reading an article recently that said the rate of brick and mortar businesses that are pulling out of their shopping mall leases has accelerated because everything was shut down. So much overhead money was thrown into the wind. So you're seeing national chains that are pivoting to a mostly digital experience only. I was walking through our local shopping mall just yesterday, and I counted over 50% of the spaces were empty. And that's only going to accelerate. I believe that in the next 10 years, we're going to see shopping malls that become Amazon distribution centers, or shopping malls that are repurposed as church startups or community centers. What we saw with COVID accelerated what was already happening. And the same is true for the local church and small businesses that were already struggling, that already had heavy overhead costs. You don't need to focus on your Jay Leno's. You need to focus on the mission. And you have to move beyond survival mode to start thriving, to figure out what does winning look like in 2021 and beyond, because what worked yesterday won't work today. The world has changed. Gen Z is more skeptical than ever. And yet in my world, church world, there are more people to reach than ever. 3 weeks ago, some new stats came out from the Worldview Inventory that was conducted by Arizona Christian University. According to the American Worldview Inventory of 2021, it's a survey of the philosophy of life in American adults conducted by Arizona Christian University. They asked questions to millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers, and the greatest generation. So depending on what time period you were born in, you've had different life experiences. So millennials, people born from 1984 to 2002, they're the digital generation, the first generation where having a smartphone, a supercomputer in your pocket is the norm. Gen Xers, that's my people. Gen Xers, those born between 1965 and 1983, we were the last generation that experienced the world before the internet. Baby boomers from 1946 to 1964, they have a different worldview. And then, of course, the greatest generation, our great-grandparents from 1927 to 1945. So researchers found that among recent generations, millennials have gone farther in cutting ties with local churches and Christian worldviews. For example, 43% of millennials stated they either don't know, don't care, or don't believe God exists. 43% of millennials, those who are in their 20s and 30s, 43% either don't know, don't care, or don't believe that God exists. So I don't have time. I don't have the fortune of chasing after any Jay Lenos in my life, man. I've got a focus. I have an opportunity. I've got an audience to reach. That's what I want to spend my time and energy on, reaching the 43%, not throwing a past Jay Leno under the bus. Don't burn bridges, build bridges, press forward. Isn't that what the Apostle Paul said in the book of Philippians? He says, forgetting what lies behind. So yeah, I got screwed out of the Tonight Show. He says, forget about it. I press on. I press forward. My eyes are on the prize. If I look backwards in a race, I'm going to stumble, fall, trip, get skinned knees. I won't win a medal. But man, if I am aiming for the gold, I got to press through the pain. Listen, you may be a leader today throwing a pity party over something that happened in the past. You don't have time to maintain these regrets. Every quarterback plays hurt. I'm a big basketball guy. I'm watching these NBA playoffs. I'm kind of laughing at the Brooklyn Nets because I'm not about super teams, okay? I think it's silly that KD is getting all these super guys on the team. And so I'm laughing at them as now deep into the playoffs, they're getting injured. I mean, I don't want them to get hurt, but it's hilarious in a sense because they are unable to play hurt. Man, if you turn on the Super Bowl, you don't have time to sit on the bench. If you hurt your ankle, you still get your butt on the field and you move that ball forward because it's the freaking Super Bowl. And I'm telling you, if you want to be a fearless leader, if you want to make a change in your life, your leadership, your legacy, you're going to have to play hurt. That's just the way it is. Life isn't fair. Yeah, get in line. Go over to a third world country and then tell me that life isn't fair here in America. I mean, seriously, people, you have it so good. You need to press forward, just like Paul did in Philippians. I love reading the scriptures. It always inspires me to press on, just like Conan O'Brien moved forward in his life. When you look at the writings of Paul in the New Testament, you see not only Holy Scripture, but these are actual letters. Like Paul would send words of encouragement to these churches that he started from scratch. And after, saying, here's what God says, and thus saith the Lord, at the end, you could tell it was a heartfelt message in a letter because Paul would add in some of his own personal thoughts. And sometimes these were really funny because he'd say stuff, oh yeah, if you see Marge, could you tell her to close the refrigerator door? I mean, he would say stuff that my grandmother grandma would say at the end of a handwritten letter when I was in college, like, I hope you're staying warm. I hope you're putting money in savings. It's just hilarious, but you get his heart as a leader. So I was looking today at 1 Corinthians 16. Corinth was this major city. Paul had spent a lot of time starting a church from scratch. He's like a small business startup, except he's not selling a product. And so this is like a couple years later, he writes this letter to the church in Corinth, and he's like, you guys are screwed up, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so he gives them some words of instruction. And then at the end of the letter, I love this. He says in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 5, kind of his personal thoughts. He goes, I plan to be traveling through Macedonia, and afterward, I will visit you and perhaps stay there for a while or even spend the winter with you. And that cracks me up. Like, Paul is a major historical church figure. This is the guy who writes like a chunk of the Bible. That's a pretty important job, don't you think? He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. Paul's the guy who starts churches outside of Jerusalem. If it wasn't for Paul, there would be no churches in your neighborhood, I promise you. And so with this heavy responsibility and with writing the Bible, Paul, he holds things with an open hand. Even though he's this important leader, he's preaching, he's raising up younger leaders, he doesn't get so rigid and so type A that he doesn't leave space for life. So I love this. He goes, I'm going to be traveling through Macedonia, and afterwards I may come visit you for a little while, or maybe I'll spend the winter. I'll sleep on the couch. I'll feed the cat. That's just amazing to me. He has flexibility. And man, to be that kind of leader, to be so sure of your calling, so sure of your focus, that you allow the space for grace, man, that's amazing. He goes on later, if you drop down to verse 12, he says, hey, I want to talk to you about our brother Apollos. Now, about our brother Apollos, I've tried hard to convince him to come visit you with the other brothers, but it's simply not the right time for him now. But don't worry, he'll come when he has the opportunity. Again, that blows me away. This guy's on a mission from God. It's like the Blues Brothers on a mission from God. And Apollos is like one of his right-hand up-and-coming leaders. And he's like, if he has the opportunity, he's going to seize it. And if there's no opportunity, he'll move on. The same is true if you've been wounded, if you've been Jay Leno'd. If there's an opportunity to build bridges, to move forward together, then like Apollos, you're going to seize that opportunity fearlessly. And if that ship has sailed, then perhaps you'll just move on. Paul wraps this up. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13, he says, remember to stay alert. Now is not the time to get depressed and to think about the past and, things were great pre-COVID and now everything's upside down. Yeah, get over it. Move forward like Conan O'Brien. Paul says, remember to stay alert. Be present. Don't have your feet in the past. Have your feet where you are now. Be alive and see what potential lies ahead of you. Live in grace. Walk in love. So you had a couple road bumps. Great. Everybody does. But the glory is not in sitting in the dirt whining. The glory is reserved for the fearless leader who stands back up, dusts himself off, doesn't seek revenge, but seeks to make a difference. So remember to stay alert, hold firmly to all that you believe, stay focused on your mission. Be mighty and full of courage. Let love and kindness be the motivation behind all that you do. We don't need leaders that are full of judgment. We need leaders who are full of love and laughter, because laughter is universal. And those of us who fearlessly embrace our inner child, who go walking into our organization with a playfulness, that's what's going to grab people's attention and inspire them to trust you again. Be a Conan O'Brien. Get back to making people laugh. Put a smile on their faces in a world that seeks to tear them down. Lift them up. That's how you become a fearless leader. And that is how Conan O'Brien dealt with Jay Leno. If this has been helpful to you, I want to invite you to join me for a live Fearless Leadership Coaching on Zoom this Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have the privilege of pouring into leaders like you, church leaders, business leaders, with insanely practical tips from the world of comedy, plus encouragement and raw motivation. My only rule is if you hop on the Zoom call, we don't have time for egos. No swagger, no comparison games. This isn't junior high gym class. We don't compare, guys. Instead, with Fearless Leadership Coaching, it's 60 minutes live with me, with other men and women like you from around the country, as long as you got a strong Wi-Fi connection that can connect to Zoom, and you've got a passion for becoming a better leader, the sky's the limit. So all you got to do is get the Zoom link, which you can get by subscribing to my free leadership email at jonathanherron.com. Seriously, it's free. It costs you nothing. You get what you pay for. Go to jonathanherron.com, sign up for my leadership blast. You'll get an invite to this week's Zoom Fearless Leadership Coaching Live this Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll laugh together. You'll get encouraged. And this week, you're going to learn how we've completely retooled our approach here at Life Church post-pandemic. How do we integrate digital realities along with a historically analog business model? So we're going to share with you our new approach. If it works for you, take it, rip it off, use it. I'm not looking to be original. I'm looking to be effective. And so are you. We'll also be sharing some of the thinking of how we are purposefully putting together our worship experiences to have the greatest impact. We've redefined our target audience. And again, this is going to be not only inspiring and motivational, but hopefully it puts some new tools in your tool belt, and it's free. jonathanherron.com. Sign up for the weekly leadership e-blast, and we'll send you the link to this week's Fearless Leadership Coaching on Zoom. Hey, if this has been helpful to you, let me know what most stuck out, either in the comments on our YouTube channel or in a positive review on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this. Every positive review, every positive comment and like on YouTube, it helps improve our algorithms, which means we are able to reach more people like you and help them become fearless leaders. So thank you in advance for doing your part to help us reach more listeners and more viewers on YouTube. Speaking of which, I'd love to connect with you. The easiest way is hopping on my website, jonathanherron.com. Tons of articles that are free, all about how to connect through comedy, along with a ton of video resources that are free for you and your team to go through together. I'm also on social media at High Five John. High five, like giving you a high five, man. Give me five. At High Five, because I live in the High Five state. At High Five, Jon, on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the socials. Hey, we will be back again soon with episode 57 of the Fearless Leadership Podcast. So make sure you're subscribed. Don't miss a single episode. And remember, If you were Jay Leno'd, let your past be in the past. What do they say in The Lion King? Let your behind be behind you. Press forward. Take the high road and see what God can do through you. I'm Jonathan Herron. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy your burrito.